We're so glad you've decided to join us for this week's message from Anchor Chapel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Our hope is that you're both encouraged and challenged in your relationship with Jesus. Be blessed as you listen to this week's message.
So today we are starting up a brand new series over the next few weeks called Above the Noise. And I'm really excited about this series because I think we're going to be answering a lot of the questions that all of us ask. We all have these very similar questions, and what we're going to be focusing on in the series Above the Noise is how do we hear the voice of God even in the middle of all of the noise around us. So there's noise in all these different forms. It might be watching the news, it might be on Facebook, it might be at work. You're going to hear all these opinions, all this noise in your life all the time. And sometimes because of the noise we hear, it's hard to hear the voice of God in the middle of that. It's hard to hear what God might be doing or might be asking you to do or calling you to. And today I think it's really probably going to be one of the messages that I'm most passionate about in this, that we're going to be talking about what exactly is your calling. What is it that you specifically were called to? I think as a church, we all have like a calling that is very similar. We are all called to lift up and exalt the name of Jesus in everything that we do. We're called to build His church. But I want to talk today about what it looks like to find your call, your specific purpose, the reason you were put on this earth. Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to fix? What am I supposed to make better? So today's message is called Holy Discontent, and I believe that it's going to speak to us right where we are. I know it's going to challenge us. It has challenged me years ago. I first heard about this idea, this thought, and it changed my life forever. So I want to talk to you about that today. And if I'm thinking about this and thinking about what is it that really our calling is, I believe it's your sound. It is your voice. It is your impact in this world. Now, I don't know how many of you might have a small dog like we have. So if you've been to our house, you know our dog, you know our family, and our dog is actually, we have a black mini schnauzer. She is fairly small. She's our firstborn. She's our first little girl, and she's the one, we always loved her. She's so precious. She's a part of our family. But as she has gotten older, she's gotten a little more ornery. She's gotten a little bit louder, and I don't know if you guys have a small, loud dog. Anybody have a small, loud dog in here, or you know exactly what I'm talking about? Hey, look, I can't really see you in here, so if you want me to hear from you, you got to say something back, and which is totally welcome. If you want to say amen, you want to clap, you want to laugh, you go ahead and do it. I need some response today. So how many of you have a small dog? Anybody? Small dog. We got a couple people with small dogs. So my small dog, if you have a small dog and it's loud, then you know it is going to be barking all the time. If you knock on the door, my dog's going to be, it's going to start barking. If we say come in, it already knows that somebody could be at the door, because what we tried to do is if we'd see people coming, we're like, well, maybe nobody should knock on the door. Let's just say come in. And she figured that out too. So we say come in, and she just starts barking, just loud and obnoxious, always barking. But this dog, we love her, but she just got annoying. We had to do something about this loud barking. So we started looking into what can you do to actually stop a dog from barking. Well, apart from pulling its vocal cords out, which is not something we wanted to do, we were like, oh, well, they make these little shock collars for dogs. So we were like, well, let's go ahead and see if one of these might work for our little dog, Charlie. So we get a little shock collar, a small one that's like her size, and we don't really know how to use it, so we just we set it kind of generic, and we put it on the dog, and she starts barking whenever this thing is all fired up, fresh battery in there, and she starts barking, and you can see the light go off on it whenever it's shocking, and you can hear this beeping whenever it's shocking. So she starts barking, and then all of a sudden you hear, and she starts freaking out. She starts yelling, starts crying and screaming, and she runs under the table after she starts barking. She runs to the table, but she doesn't stop screaming. So she keeps screaming, and as she screams, it keeps shocking her. Every time she makes a noise, she gets shocked again. So she's running for her life, and she's crying, but she doesn't know that because she's crying, it's shocking her more. So she's under this thing, and she's, and she keeps on getting shocked. So I get under there, and I'm like, baby, come see Charlie. And I'm trying to get it off, and of course the one we got's you put it on a belt, so it's hard to get to. And then she's trying to bite me while I'm taking it off. I'm like, I'm trying to help you, or you can just leave it on if you go bite me. But so I'm trying to help this poor dog. I finally get it off. I feel terrible. Our little baby, our firstborn, It's shocked right there and under the table. I feel so bad about it. But a couple weeks, and there wasn't even a couple weeks, she had gotten over once she came to, and once she got back in the flow of life, she starts barking again. In a couple weeks, she starts barking again. She's just making all this noise again. I'm like, we got to do something about this dog. So I'll put up with this for another 6 months, okay? So 6 months until this week, our dog is barking, knock on the door, she starts barking. Come in, she starts barking. Everything, she's barking. UPS guy shows up, she starts barking. She's barking all the time. So I'm like, we've got to do something. So I go in the closet, and I grab the shock collar, and I bring it out. And I'm like, come here, Charlie. We're going to have to put this thing back on you. So I get it, and I bring it out, and she looks at it, and her little short little tail in between her legs, and she comes up and she kneels down like that, and I put it around her, and she is just shaking by herself. She's just like standing there. She's so scared. She's not making a noise. But the funny thing is, what she didn't realize was that the battery had been dead. The battery was been dead for months because it was just sitting in there, and it would like stay on and blink, constantly. But the battery was dead. But it didn't matter because the memory of it kept her quiet. And I was happy with that. I was totally fine with that. But what she didn't realize is the very thing, if I could pinpoint anything that our dog was created to do, put on this earth to do, it'd probably be barking first. It'd be eating and sleeping and pooping in the yard and barking. That'd be about it. That's about all. She maybe snuggle every now and then. But I think that's about all that a dog could amount to here on this earth. And she has lost her voice because of the memory of this shock collar. But the battery was gone. And I thought about this week, and I thought, man, whenever it comes to our calling, the thing you're created to do, if it is your voice, if it is the thing that you were meant to sound, if it is the sound that you make, the calling you have, if it is the sound you make, what is it that, like Charlie, has stopped you from making your sound? What is it? Maybe it's your past. Maybe it is something that has come back up. Maybe it's a fear of failure. Something is stopping many of us today from making your sound. Every one of us, you are meant to make a sound. You are meant to make an impact in this world, to leave this world different than the way than the way it was whenever you showed up. You're called to make a sound. You're called to make a difference. I want to look today at the story of Nehemiah, one of the greatest stories in the Bible. I love this story. And, I was thinking about this and about just like what makes you different. And I don't know if you guys know or are familiar with Steve Martin's comedy. So obviously you may have seen some movies that Steve Martin's in. Steve Martin started his comedy act back in the 70s. And whenever he showed up and he started doing comedy, he wanted to be different because to this point, comedy was basically getting up on stage and you would tell a joke and it would be a punchline and everybody would laugh. And it was just that same pattern over and over. Well, Steve Martin shows up and he's like, I want to do comedy different. I've got to find my own voice. So he starts showing up he's making bad balloon animals. He showed up with an arrow through his head, all this stuff. He's just this wacky, and he became known as a wild and crazy guy on stage is what his act became known as. But this is one of the things he said about himself starting off in his career. He said, I had a revelation that I would never amount to anything if I didn't have my own voice. And I think that what Steve Martin understood and what Steve Martin was looking for was the same thing everybody looks for. That you are looking for your own voice. You are looking for, why was I put on this earth? Why am I here? What is it about me that is necessary to this planet? Why do I have to be here? And usually the opposite of this, you hear oftentimes those who struggle with depression and those who commit suicide, they often just say things like, I just wish I wouldn't be here, or nobody would have noticed if I wouldn't have been here. It's the opposite, the antithesis of what God puts in us. The nature of a calling is the opposite of what the enemy will do to speak to us to end our lives because we don't have anything worth living for. You do have something worth living for. You are called to something. You have a voice, you have a purpose, you have a reason that you exist. Nehemiah found that. I want to look at Nehemiah's story, and let's just do a real quick history lesson in this. But before we even jump into Nehemiah's story, I want you to know today, and I'll give you a chance to do this. If you're here today and you don't know Jesus, you'll never know calling. You'll never know purpose. Your calling is only in Jesus. Only He can give you a divine calling. It doesn't come from anything else. It doesn't come from good works or any good thing that you can do or any just passion alone. Our calling from heaven, a divine calling, only comes through Jesus. So if you don't know Jesus, that's the first issue. So we're going to give you a chance to know Jesus later today. So in Nehemiah's story, he comes on the scene, and he actually comes on the scene after the Babylonian exile. And this is like when the Jews were taken captive by Babylon, and they were all forced to leave Jerusalem, and they became slaves again. But this is what ended up happening. This is around 607 to 586 BC. And then they return. So after the exile, they return to a broken kingdom. Literally, because of war, the walls have literally fallen down. There are no walls of protection around Jerusalem. There are gaping holes in this wall to where they could easily be attacked. So this is where Jerusalem is at this point, and this is where Nehemiah finds Jerusalem. And Nehemiah comes on the scene. He hears about this about 480 BC, which is this is almost right before the silent era, where there were no prophets who had received a word from the Lord, at least not documented before Jesus came out. Malachi was really the last of the prophets, and he heard something from the Lord. The last thing written down was about 435. So Nehemiah comes on the scene right before that, before about 400 years of silence. Nehemiah 1. This is what ends up happening. Nehemiah gets wind that the walls have fallen down. They said to me, "Things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace." That word disgrace is key. This is the way that he sees the city of God. It's a disgrace that the walls have come down. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. And he says this, he takes it personal. "When I heard this, I sat down and wept. I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven." And when I look at Nehemiah's story, whenever I see the way that he responds to this news, so Nehemiah, a backstory for him is he's a Jew, but he is working for the king of Persia, King Artaxerxes at the time. This is who he's working for. He is a cupbearer, so he is kind of like he's the most expendable person that you could have on your team. He is the guy who drinks the cup before the king drinks the cup to make sure that it's not poisoned. So if anybody's going to die, Nehemiah is going to die first. But it also means that he was trusted by the king. So he wasn't really valued. He wasn't really valued, but he was trusted. He was trusted by the king. The king would trust that he wouldn't himself poison the king's cup. But he was trusted enough, so Nehemiah hears about this. And when Nehemiah hears about this, he asks the king, can I go and help and try to rebuild this kingdom? Can I go and try to rebuild the city of God? My people, their city is fallen down. It is a disgrace what I see. Can I go and make a difference? Can I go and help to rebuild this? I think the first thing you need to ask yourself, if you're looking for your calling, you're looking for what am I made for? What I'm calling today, your holy discontent. The discontent in your soul that God has put there. When you're looking for that, you've got to ask yourself, what is in my gut? What is in my gut? What pains me whenever I see it done wrong? Whenever I see this injustice, whenever I see this thing, what is it that brings pain to my gut? It makes me have to do something about it. What is it that keeps you up at night? What is it that you are constantly planning and wishing that somebody would do something about? That is the beginning of your holy discontent, of recognizing what it is. Every single one of us have it. Every single one of us have something that God has placed inside of us. Bill Hybels wrote a book years ago that just changed my perspective on this, and it's actually called Holy Discontent, where I get the title of this message from. Bill Hybels is a pastor of Willow Creek Church in Chicago, a church that really kind of paved the way for modern church as we see it today, even theater church. And the way that they have done ministry has been an example for so many people. Now, he is an older man, but he's an incredible author, pastor. And he wrote this book called Holy Discontent. And he talks about this Popeye moment is what he calls it. So I don't know, how many of you grew up and you remember watching Popeye when you were a kid? This was me. I remember watching Popeye. Well, I don't know if it was on TV or what, but we didn't have cable. So I don't know how I was watching this, but we ended up watching Popeye whenever I was a kid. And every episode would be kind of the same thing. So Popeye had this girlfriend named Olive, this skinny little girl. Okay, her name was Olive, and Popeye loves Olive. It loves her so much, but of course there had to be some kind of a villain in the cartoon. So the villain, Brutus, would always come and he wanted to take Olive for himself. Now, Popeye was a pretty mild-mannered sailor. He was a pretty normal kind of guy, and he was just a normal dude, He's got these huge forearms, though, but he didn't use them. He didn't really get all bowed up until somebody would mess with Olive. And when somebody would mess with Olive, and Brutus would take Olive, he would take out a can of spinach and he would squeeze it, and he would pop the spinach up, and he would chew the spinach, and he would go and get Olive. And this is what he would say every time. He would say, when somebody would take Olive, "That's all I can stand, and I can't stand no more." And then he would go out, and he would go and back and rescue Olive, and he would go get her. And this is what Bill Hybels writes about. He says, every single person, every single one of us has a Popeye moment, has a Popeye revelation, where you say about something in this life, "That's all I can stand, and I can't stand no more." And you have to do something about the thing that you are struggling with, that you are frustrated by. You have to do something about it. So in his book, Holy Discontent, Bill Hybels writes this. This is so good. He says, there is something out there that God is waiting for you to grab onto so that he can use you to help solve it. I love that. I love this idea that there's something out there. There is something that you are specifically called to that God is waiting for you to grab hold of so that you can make a difference. I think this is so good what Nehemiah does. He sees the city, hears about the city in ruins, and he goes and the first thing he does is he prays. He says that he begins to fast. He begins to pray. And he takes the responsibility for Jerusalem on his shoulders. Now, he didn't tear the walls down. He wasn't living in Jerusalem. There were other people living there. When the Jews came back, they rebuilt the temple, but they hadn't touched the walls yet. This wasn't really Nehemiah's responsibility as far as man goes. But Nehemiah took it upon himself, and his holy discontent was awakened when he saw that the house of God, the city of God, was in ruins. And he began to take it personally, and he let this thing awaken in him, so where he had to go and do something about it. He took it personally. He didn't wait and blame somebody else. He didn't look at somebody else in the city and be like, "Why aren't they doing something?" He took it on himself when he said, "I'm going to do something. I'm going to make a difference here. I'm going to be the one to make a difference." So Nehemiah goes to the city. He asks the king, "King, can I go and check it out? Can I see this?" He goes to the city. He doesn't even talk to the leadership. He's not doing this to undermine the leadership, but he doesn't want to waste their time. So he goes and he observes everything. Then he makes a plan. And he brings a plan to the leadership about how the walls can be rebuilt. He goes and he does this. He's very diligent about it. He's clear that he knows exactly, this is my holy discontent. This is what I'm going to do. And some of you might be asking today, and I know we all come to this place where you're like, but what do I actually do? What is the thing that I do? There's things I care about, but what does that look like? When I can get up out of my bed in the morning, I put my shoes on, what do I do for the Lord? I think it's very important to ask that question, and I think actually we have something in place to help you to find it. It's called Anchor Next. And if you haven't been to Anchor Next yet, we want to encourage you to do that. If you're here for the first couple of weeks or whatever, and you've been here, look, at the beginning of the month, first and second week, we're going to do what we call Anchor Next, where you're going to learn a little bit about the church, but we're also going to help you to find your calling, what you were created for. We're going to help to bring the passion that you have to the surface so that you can find the thing you're created for and help you to step in it. There's a lot of ways that you can serve in the local church, in Anchor Chapel. But if you don't see something here, I want to challenge you. You start something. We're going to give you that opportunity. You have something that's on your heart that we aren't doing yet. We want to give you an opportunity to make that thing a reality. We're not just going to ask you to conform and look like us, but instead we say, hey, what is on your heart? What is it that you care about? We want to help you to find that thing. But I think that more than anything, when you start off in the house of God, when you start off in the local church, when you start off serving in church, God will bless what your next steps are. You have to start off in the house of God. Too many people, I see this so often. People want to start their own thing, and they want to be outside of the church, and they don't want to serve the local church. Jesus came and he died for the local church. This is the thing that he's building. He's building the local church. So if we're not about the thing Jesus is about, he's not going to be about your thing. Jesus is asking us first, step into the thing I'm building, and then I will equip and I will resource and I will enable you to do the thing that I've put on your heart. But I think all of us have to be have to first make our first decision. I'm going to serve in the local church. I want to serve the body of Christ, and then Jesus will enable us to make a difference for the vision that we have. Nehemiah 2, if the story continues, it says in verse 17, it says, but now I said to them, so Nehemiah goes to the leaders and he starts talking to them. He brings a plan. You know very well the trouble we're in. He says, look around. All the walls have fallen down. I know you see it. I know you see that, and I don't know why you haven't done anything about it, but I know you see it. I know it's obvious that all of this is a disaster. What Jerusalem is in right now, it's a disaster. You know very well the trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. And in this disgrace, it's interesting that he calls it a disgrace. He takes it personal. He takes it as a sin against God. He's like, listen, God's name it doesn't look good right now. We have got to once again bring honor to God by rebuilding his city. He takes it personal. You see the passion that he has. He says in verse 18, then I told them about how the gracious hand of God had been on me and about my conversation with the king. So he had spoken with the king, and the king allowed him to go and to begin to rebuild the wall. They replied at once, yes, let's rebuild the wall. So they began the good work. What I love about this is that the people of God, all these leaders who are here in Jerusalem, it's almost like they've just been waiting on Nehemiah to show up. They see this and they're like, yeah, I know the walls are torn down, but none of us know how to lay bricks. None of us know how to do it. None of us really know where to start with this thing. But all of a sudden, Nehemiah comes in, and I believe Nehemiah was the answer to their prayers. They saw the need, but nobody knew what to do. And Nehemiah comes in, and Nehemiah steps up, and they're like, yes, help us. I think for you, I think what you've got to understand is just like Nehemiah, somebody is waiting on you today. Somebody is waiting on you to step into your calling. Somebody is waiting on you to step into the passion that's in your heart. Stop dreaming about it and start doing something about it. Nehemiah comes to the people and they're like, yes, you are what we've been waiting for. Somebody's waiting on you. And what Nehemiah does, I love how he goes to the people and he's like, listen, this is a big wall. We've got to rebuild this thing, but I'm going to need your help. Who do you have? I can show them how to lay bricks. I can show them how to do. I'll help. I'm here to do it, but I can't do it myself. If your dream is so small that you don't need other people to accomplish it, you're dreaming too small. You should be dreaming so big and so extravagantly, and so you should dream in such a way that you have to have other people to help you solve that thing. You should dream in such a way. You should have a vision for something, for making an impact in this world that needs other people. That's the way God created us. He put us on this earth to have community, to be together, to be unified, to work together, to sweat together, to build something together. Nehemiah recognizes that and he says, I need some help. I'm going to need some people. I'm going to need people to come together so that we can make a difference together. So Nehemiah saw it. We've got to have these dreams that are impossible for us to do by ourselves. Bill Hybels also says this in Holy Discontent. He says, you may be the one person that God is looking for in order to reverse some of the ugly and destructive trends in your generation. Is there something in your gut that bugs you so much that even your peers don't see it? That your family members don't see it, that other people in the church don't see it, that people outside the church obviously probably don't see it if it's a kingdom thing. Something in your heart is bugging you so much. And Bo Hybels says, and I believe this is true of every one of us, that something is bugging us so much that you are called to make a difference about it. You are called to do something about it. You're called to reverse some of the trends that you see. You're called to make a difference in the things that you see that bug you, that hurt you, that bring pain, that bring you to your knees. You're called to do something about it. If there's anything I want you to write down today, this is the one statement that I want to leave you with. God has appointed you as the answer to your frustration. God has appointed you as the answer to your frustration. You know, so many people get all frustrated and they get mad that other people don't think the way that they think. And you see this on Facebook all the time. People ranting and people getting all mad. Why don't you care about this? Why don't anybody, whatever? And everybody gets all mad on this. It's because you're the one who's called to do something. It's not everybody else's problem. Whenever you project your frustrations on somebody else, you just end up annoying people. If you think about what projection is, right now there's an image being projected on the screen. The screen has nothing to do with the image. The image comes from the projector. right now, the thing that you can be so frustrated with that you are projecting onto other people, the source doesn't come from them. They may never get it. It's in your gut. It's in your spirit. You do something about it. You get off your butt, stop being lazy, and you make something of it. God's calling you to make the difference. It's not about the things that you want other people to do. It's not about you wanting to see them do it. Nehemiah didn't say, somebody do something. Nehemiah said, I will do something. I will make the difference here. In Nehemiah 4, it says this, that these guys step in, these two enemies of Israel, Sanballat and Tobiah. You never trust a guy named Sanballat or Tobiah. These two guys step in, and it says that they want to bring violence. They want to start war. So these two guys, the Arabs, the Ammonites, the Ashdodites, heard that the work was going ahead and that the gaps in the wall in Jerusalem were being repaired. They were furious. They were so mad that they wanted to bring war. It says that they made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem. They didn't like that Jerusalem, that used to be a threat but was now not a threat, was again becoming a mighty house of God, that God was beginning to put his hand of blessing on it again. They wanted to stop it. So these guys respond in violence. They wanted to fight, and they wanted to throw us into confusion, but we prayed to our God, and we guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. These guys come in with violence, so much violence, they wanted to fight them. You're going to always have people in opposition to your dream. You're going to always have people in opposition to the vision that God's put in your heart. And even though these guys were so violent, man, these dudes could have worked for United Airlines. These guys were out, these dudes just overboard. They come in and they want to kill these guys for rebuilding a wall. It's like there's a bunch of bricklayers, bro. Chill out. But they come in and they're doing their thing, and they're like, man, we've got to stop it. Somebody wants to stop you. Somebody wants to rob your voice. Something wants to rob your voice. But you're called to make your sound. You ever saw that bumper sticker, a bad day fishing is better than a good day at work? Maybe it's not fishing for you. You're probably not called to fishing. But what is the thing that even though it may be a bad day and you may have opposition, you still would rather be doing that than anything else? Maybe that's the beginning of finding your holy discontent. What is it that even though it hurts, you'd rather be doing it than anything else? In Nehemiah 4, verse 17, let's continue. It says this, and the band can come up. It says that the laborers continued. They carried on their work with one hand. So they've got like a shovel in one hand, and then they're holding a weapon in the other. All the builders had a sword belted to their side. The trumpeters stayed with me to sound the alarm. I think is amazing about this is that they end up, they're working, they're still rebuilding the wall, but they're also defending each other. They're also helping each other. They're also fighting this enemy that is trying to stop them from doing what they're called to do. What an incredible picture. I think that when you step into and you discover what your holy discontent is, and you begin to step into the purpose and the thing God created you to do, you will have opposition. So you need to have a shovel in one hand, and you're going to have a sword in the other hand. You're going to have to go diligently and fight for what God has called you to, and you're going to also have to fight against what the enemy is saying to you. You're going to have to play two roles. And not only that, I love the picture that they defended each other. They helped each other to find the thing they were called to do and help each other to build a wall. We're called to do this together. In the end, what an incredible story. In the end, 50,000 people, 50,000 displaced Israelites returned to a safe city whose walls had been rebuilt. And actually, because the walls had come down numerous times, it says that the walls were rebuilt in record time in 52 days. And then Nehemiah, after this, after people come back, he goes back to his old job. Nehemiah goes back to being a cupbearer. Of all the jobs, he goes back to that. This humble and lowly job. He didn't go to Israelites, to the leaders of Israel and say, hey, remember how I helped you build that wall? Just remember me in your next election season, okay? I'm going to want a position. He didn't do it for position. He did it to serve God's house. Your vision and the thing you're created for, it is for nothing other than to serve the vision of Jesus. It's not for your name. It's not for your fame. If that drives you in any way, you need to step back and take a break and repent and refocus. Because what Jesus is calling us to, the holy discontent that he's calling us to, is going to always be about him. That's what Jesus did. Jesus came to this earth, and he was the ultimate Nehemiah, that he came to a city, to a world with broken down walls. And he came and he began to rebuild all of us. As he went to the cross and he gave us a new beginning, he started with us. He served us. And the Bible says that God did exalt him, but he didn't come for that. But after all this was done, after he served us, God gave him the name above every other name. The name that we all need today if you're going to find your purpose, if you're going to find what you're created for.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's message from Anchor Chapel. If you're interested in supporting the ministry of Anchor, you can easily do so by visiting our website, anchorchapel.com. You can also follow us on social media at Anchor Chapel. God bless, and we'll see you next week.